thank you everyone for coming today. We really appreciate it. AI is often discussed as existing in the cloud. Prompts are entered, responses generated, data processed, and work is done, all within the confines of the digitized world we are immersed in 2026. However, the perceptions of AI as an abstraction or simply as an ambiguous tool are both false. AI does not exist without the foundational elements that are concrete, steel, water, and electricity. The scale at which AI infrastructure is growing is unlikely to stop anytime soon. Over $160 billion was invested in AI in the US in 2025 alone, whether it be tech startups or corporations such as Meta and Google. The demand for water and electricity created by the development and use of data centers has been identified as a major issue for those living nearby. As energy bills rise and groundwater depletes, the question arises of whether or not the technological advancements of AI can be justified due to the consequences. Given the significant investments put forth in the AI sector, the prospects of addressing the environmental impact are bleak. However, in order to address the injustices heightened by AI infrastructure, significant measures need to be taken. Our three speakers are here today to talk about how they, in their respective fields, have made progress towards addressing the issue and how they are currently contributing to creating a more sustainable future. Joining us today is Professor Hendrik Hamann, who serves as an AI chief scientist in the director's office at Brookhaven National Laboratory and has over 20 years of experience working in IBM research. His work focuses on AI foundation models that support energy infrastructure by predicting power outages, load and renewable forecasting, system adequacy, disaster recovery, and more. His work has led to less power outages, lower costs for energy consumers, and more efficient usage of our grid infrastructure. Also joining us today is Aaron Miller, the Eastern Regional Manager for Shark Energy, a Canada-based company that specializes in wastewater energy transfer technology. Their technology utilizes thermal energy derived from wastewater to create a sustainable heating and cooling system for residential, commercial, and industrial applications. In his career, Mr. Miller has earned his Certified Energy Manager and Certified Energy Procurement Professional accreditations in order to provide sustainability advisory services to many of the nation's largest healthcare and commercial real estate companies. Lastly, we are joined by Nina Kshetry. As president of Insaris and Circle H2O, Nina has worked in water-scarce countries across Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and multiple states in the US, where her companies help wastewater plants to streamline data collection, processing, and reporting in order to derive actionable insights powered by AI. Her work with Circle H2O focuses on wastewater resource recovery from wastewater and waste-to-energy treatment solutions. I will now be handing things over to Kira, who has some questions for our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you for your intro, Frankie. Thank you all for being here today. So I want to kick off this panel by gaining a better understanding of all of your background, how long you've been working with AI, and how that has really shaped your perception of AI's relationship to physical resources. Aaron, if you would like to go first.
Oh, really? First. So repeat the question again, just real quick.
How long you've been working with AI and how that's shaped your perception of AI to physical resources?
So I've been working with AIs, I started out as a consumer, right? Like everybody else, I guess, using, at the time, ChatGPT until I've migrated to Claude for various reasons. So I've been using it basically ever since I guess it came out commercially, but I would say that I joined Shark about 4 years ago, and that's when things really got serious because, as you mentioned in your intro, power and water consumption are massive drags on the market. So our company, we're providing heating and cooling using an existing resource, wastewater energy transfer. So I would say that getting into this industry really is when things got hyperscaled for me because I started to see the negative possible impacts of AI on the environment and on the grid and all these other things now that I'm so concerned about that I necessarily wasn't before I started joining. So I'd say when I started my tenure at Shark is when things really took off for me and the light bulb went off.
Hendrik?
Yeah, so maybe let's level set a little bit. So for me, AI is not as brand new as it might appear to many. So for me, AI existed actually in some form or the other already 20, 25 years ago. Even the expert systems we had in the 50s, machine learning is a form of AI. Then deep learning came along in 2010, etc. Now we are at a stage where everyone starts talking about AI. So I've been involved in AI with that caveat. I've been involved in AI since, I would say, 20, 25 years. I mean, what is the basis of AI? What is AI? AI is computation, a special form of computation. And in my line of work, previously at IBM, I used to work really on both sides. There is sustainable computing, sustainable AI. So how can I make AI and computing more sustainable, more efficient? And then there's the other model, which is how can I use computing for sustainability? So I worked on both sides. On the sustainable AI, I was mostly involved in scaling. The reason why we have small computers today is because semiconductor industry was able to scale these devices. And that is a way to make actually AI more efficient, right? So the reason why we have mobile phones, which can do all these things, has a lot to do with the improvements we've made in sustainable and efficient AI. And then on AI for sustainability, I've been heavily involved in, yes, AI for electric grid, but also AI for data centers. How can we optimally cool data centers? How we can allocate workloads across data centers? How can we improve weather forecasting? And then that coupled potentially to data centers, etc.
So I guess going back, I'm an environmental engineer, and I started my career maybe 20 or so years ago. But when I really got involved in AI was around 10 years ago, and that was before generative AI became really commonplace or popular in the public sphere. At that time, I had been working with a lot of water and wastewater treatment plants, and I saw an opportunity for plants to collect and use their data for better decision making. So at the time that was when I started NSERIS back in 2017, and we started to work with facilities to sort of prove the use case of using advanced analytics to make better decisions. And at the time it was a lot of machine learning, classification, prediction, so sort of classical machine learning type problems that we were working on. And then during the time of me having NSERIS as a company, that's when we had the Gen AI boom, and it sort of coincided with the time where NSERIS became a software as a service company. We used to just do consulting. And so I started to incorporate more Gen AI and agentic AI into NSERIS at a time where the software industry is also getting disrupted. So it's been really interesting to sort of, the last decade be a part of this whole sort of transformation that's happening. I've, in NSERIS, used data to help facilities operate better. So can they operate with using less energy, lower chemicals? Can they achieve their treatment objectives? Can they reduce their carbon emissions? So basically around efficiency gains and plant optimization gains. A lot of the focus has been on that. I also have another company that's an engineering firm, Circle H2O. So with that company, I work with industries across the board to help them understand how they can treat their wastewater and gain resources out of it, so resource recovery. Can we treat wastewater for recycle reuse? Can we treat wastewater for energy recovery? And from that lens, I've also been interested in what are we doing at data centers with regards to more efficient cooling, right? Can we recycle and reuse our blowdown water? Can we use non-potable treated wastewater for cooling instead of fresh water? So from that lens, it's been interesting to look at the discussions around data centers and their water requirements. When I first started my career, I was working in DC, and one of our large clients was the EPA, and I did a report on the water energy nexus. And now I think it's, the lens is the water AI energy nexus. Everything uses each other. So, I'm helping operators run their plants better with AI. Well, that has a water and energy footprint. I am, if I have an AI, data center and it's using energy, that energy actually also has a water and carbon footprint. So everything is like a nexus, and you really have to look at it, I think, big picture to see where does it make sense from a sustainability perspective to use AI versus not. Not every workflow needs AI. So where do we really need to be using AI and not is an important decision that I think engineers and domain experts really need to be thinking carefully about. Aaron, I'd like to focus in on the work that you do with Shark Energy and geothermal energy. And I was wondering if you could provide like a realistic timeline on how that could be implemented into data centers and any policy that would help geothermal be regulated in that system.
It's happening now. We're a Canadian company, so one of the best parts about it is for the first 5 minutes, someone thinks I'm Canadian until I start speaking, and they're like, oh, that guy's definitely New York. But the Canadians have a real commitment to sustainability, to recycling, and the First Nations. There's a real understanding of like the indigenous people. So they are, a lot of these nations are setting up data centers in these northern colder climates and repurposing or reimagining, for the lack of a better term, data centers as an energy hub, as a source of good. By, I guess, tribal law, any projects that they do have to benefit 7 generations forward. So they have a real long vision. So there's one nation in particular, I'm not supposed to say their name just yet, but they're in a cold area, and they're setting up a massive data center for one of the large firms, and they're going to use that energy to melt snow on their walkways, heat the pools in the community center. I mean, literally, you go down the checklist, and there's neighborhoods or communities that have nothing to do with them, and they're going to just be feeding that energy to those neighborhoods for free cooling. Just because instead of it's the right thing to do. It makes sense, and the other option is to put it up to an evaporative cooling tower and waste all that water into the atmosphere. So, and the other thing they're looking at, and what I've been hearing about a bunch in the geothermal conferences, is BETS, Bore Field Energy Thermal Storage, where you make essentially a concentric circle of really tightly packed boreholes. And you're not using it for your traditional geothermal heat source, heat sink throughout the year. It's literally taking all that excess heat, shoving it into the ground, and saving it until you need it for later. And then you can get creative with how you use that heat, because you can actually use that heat to then extract it, pull it back out, run it through a steam heat pump like the ones that Oilan makes from Finland, turn it into steam, run that into an evaporative, into a turbine, turn it into electricity, chillers. So there's a whole bunch of creative ways that AI and data centers can be energy sources and sources of good, especially in colder climates. And it's just fascinating, because one of the challenges is a lot of these designs and a lot of the engineering and a lot of the calculations that are going into proving out that these systems actually work require massive amounts of computing and massive amounts of power. And one thing I learned, again, this is something I'm sure you've been dealing with for decades, Professor, is the 80-20, 90-10 rule. As we work, so if a data center uses 100%, this is their whole electricity bill. If 80% of it is for cooling, which is generally the rule, and that means the other 20% is for the computing. That's where they actually make their money. So as we help them to be more efficient with their cooling, my apologies, I actually have that backwards. 90% is their cooling, 10% is their processing. If we help them reduce their cooling load down to 80 by using geothermal or any innovative technologies, it's not that they're going to use electricity, they're just going to take that extra 10% and now do more computing to sell more tokens to make more money. So they're coming. This is an arms race. It's incumbent upon us and you to help us figure out how to get our technologies and our processes deployed at scale. That is really the key. I heard that scale from both of you. Scale is key. We can do these one-offs all day long, and it's a great, oh, it feels good. But until we're able to tap into a large municipal sources like a wastewater treatment plant and deliver benefits to a larger community, such as they're doing in the north, I think that's going to be the Rubicon we cross, and we can figure out how to look at this as a net positive as opposed to net zero or a negative impact. Like oftentimes technologies, there's a lot of really negative stuff that happens before we can actually figure out how to mitigate against those and focus on the net positive. I don't know if that's a bit of a rambling answer, but that's it's happening now. The timeline is now, and the truth is we don't have time. To be fair, I think we're already over the cliff, but I'm not going to go down without a fight. So we need you out there to do these things now.
Thank you. Hendrik, I wanted to go back to your experience with how long you've been working with machine learning, and you pointed out how efficient that these chips have gotten, how energy efficient they've gotten, but the data center demand that we're seeing is just overloading the energy grid. Do you think there's any sort of policy or tech focus that we could look at to sort of lessen the demand on the energy grid, given that these chips are so efficient now, but they're so widely accessible?
Yeah, so let me, thanks for the question. Let me just make maybe first sort of a more general comment. Of course, this problem of data center energy consumption, mostly energy consumption, we had that before, and I like to think about this back because that was roughly 20 years ago, believe it or not. 20 years ago, reports came out that data center, that was the .com area, remember, some people may remember the .com area, and reports came out, data center energy consumption is doubling every 5 years. At that time it was 3%. And of course, you're fast forwarding today, and it did not happen, right? Because otherwise, data center energy consumption would be 25%. So it did not happen in 2005. And so why didn't it happen? And I think this really brings it back to this question. It didn't happen because there was a wake-up call for everyone, and a lot of innovation happened. There was a rise of multi-core architectures, there was more energy and power-aware architectures of microprocessors. There were all kinds of innovations coming into play, basically bending the curve, and energy consumption stayed for a long time relatively constant. So I think it's really important to understand how the complexity, right, what you have in the data center. What happens in the data center? Well, we have devices. The devices do the computations, but then the devices are architected on a chip. These things are architected into a rack. Then you have the cooling, the packaging, you have the data center, you have the software which sits on top. So it's a really complex system. And last time this happened, the industry figured out how to improve, turn all these knobs, including innovations in cooling. Now I think we are back at a stage where the use of the technology has sort of outpaced the advances, and so we are back at that place. But I honestly think there is a lot of innovation which we could bring to bear. For example, some of these ideas you brought just up, right, on the cooling, reuse of energy, reuse of heat, reuse of water, recycling. But definitely a lot of device technologies, quantum computing will help. So I am actually rather optimistic because, and that is the second reason why it didn't happen, because it's unlikely the industry will let that happen because it would cannibalize their own business. So I think that is a really important insight too, right? The data center energy consumption will not go up to 25% because it cannot, it just simply cannot.
Thank you for balancing out my pessimism.
Nina, I wanted to focus back on your work with Insaras, and if you could provide an example of the work that you do in local communities to make them more sustainably in a circular system, and how you think that could feed into data center energy.
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple of
I think I kind of can answer this question from two angles. One is with regards to the work I do with designing and building wastewater treatment plants. So actually, if you go to wastewater conferences now, we don't call them wastewater treatment plants anymore. For several years, it's been water resource recovery facilities. That's worse. That's what we call them. And basically, treating wastewater to the point where you should get some resources out of it. That's the whole design concept. And it's picking up everywhere. I mean, if you look at, just giving some examples, in California, there's a lot of projects out there that are being built that are direct wastewater to potable quality water projects that are being built. That's been actually taking place for many years now already in other countries. Singapore, for example, is one of the first to popularize, they call it new water. So they called it new water, and over 10 years ago, they made this beautiful wastewater treatment plant, treating the water for drinking water standards. And that water goes directly back to the tap. It doesn't go through another treatment plant. And the reason why we're starting to use more and more wastewater for different water purposes, whether it be potable drinking water or non-potable standards, so for toilet flushing, irrigation, etc., is because treating wastewater is way cheaper from an energy perspective than treating desalinated water. And you don't have salt water everywhere. It's very hard to treat ocean water because it has a lot of salt, and it's not easy to get that salt out, whereas wastewater doesn't have that. There's not much salt in wastewater. It's basically fresh water that we've used in a household, or most of the sewage is used in households, buildings. You might have industrial uses that do add a little bit of salt, but nothing near as much as salt water. That's kind of the worst case scenario with regards to treating for reuse quality, right? So when we talk about wastewater, it's everywhere, it's available everywhere, and we can use it for beneficial uses. And so when you look at data centers, a lot of data centers are already co-locating by wastewater facilities to be able to use that treated wastewater for cooling. And I think that's something that makes a lot of sense. Treated wastewater has many applications. One of them can be used for cooling. When you look at the cooling loop itself, you can look at cooling loops that recycle and reuse the cooling, the blowdown water from the cooling system. So as you have blowdown water, you have salts and scalants accumulate in that water. If you want to reuse it, then you need a treatment step there. A lot of data centers that use water cooling, they'll have evaporative losses, but there's designs that allow you to capture that evaporative loss. So I think from from designing and building plants perspective, there are ways that we can use wastewater to help mitigate the impact data centers have on local community freshwater sources. And wastewater recycle reuse is one of them. From the standpoint of answers, so what I do at wastewater facilities is I help gather data so they can operate those facilities more efficiently, especially when it comes to energy consumption. And with regards to data centers, one could use that same sort of monitoring, so making sure that the systems are we making sure we're monitoring that water consumption and how much water losses are actually taking place, so that companies can meet their goals. And I know a lot of companies are, all the big companies have water goals with regards to data center water consumption. So monitoring that, making sure we're meeting that, making sure that we're doing what we need to from an operations perspective to achieve that. And that's something that we're doing at NSERS at wastewater facilities that can be applied to any kind of paradigm, including a data center operation.
And I would just to contextualize, it's a great answer. The rule of thumb is 1 million gallons of wastewater a day equals 1 megawatt of thermal energy you can harvest. So a small lift station handles 3 to 5 million gallons of wastewater a day, easy. So that's 3 to 5 megawatts of thermal energy you can transfer. Think about that. We're working currently with, thankfully, New York City DEP. The city, the 5 boroughs, handles 1.3 billion gallons of wastewater a day. That's 1,300 megawatts every day that's flushed down the toilets and just wasted. So we're currently working on some pilot projects to put our tech in the tailwater. Some of them want to look at the influent, but we're working in the tailwater, which is basically the water that gets dumped into the channel, into the river, the lake, what have you. It's safe, has very small amounts, a particular amount of it has a ton of thermal energy that we're wasting. So to your point, there are so many ways to reimagine, re-acronym the wastewater treatment plant, call it what you will, but it really is a net positive. And you look at the wastewater treatment plant that's in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, handles 250 million gallons a day. That's 250 megawatts, and it's in one of the most economically depressed areas in the city. Imagine what you could do if you just, when you're running new HDPE, which is the high density polyethylene pipe that they use for gas, you can use this, it's the same pipe that they use for water for geothermal. So while you're tearing up the streets to maintain those gas assets, put a second pipe down, now all of a sudden you can run an ambient loop and provide a thermal hub for underprivileged communities, or any communities for that matter. And to take it a step further, the military is looking at our tech and what you're doing, because think about it, gravity doesn't stop. So gravity-fed sewer mains are always gonna run, even in the case of an EMP, a massive grid outage, major disaster. If you have on-site power generation, whether it's a diesel generator or a small battery, and you've got access to a gravity-fed sewer, you now have condenser water coming into your plant that you can then make hot water heating, cooling, and domestic hot water for your base. So the Navy told us straight up, we're looking at your tech, we're looking at moving our data centers onto the bases for security purposes, and now we have these wastewater treatment plants, desalinization plants, deionization plants, and also data centers, all as these energy systems all on our campus, and God forbid something bad happens, we can still use them as ongoing energy sources. It then comes down to where do they get the electricity, which is why they're also now exploring, small modular nuclear reactors, what have you. But again, it's the repurposing of existing assets is going to be one of the, I think, one of the linchpins to kind of getting past this point that you mentioned, Professor, where we're kind of at that strange place again, where it's that, are we at a net benefit or a net negative? So just wanted to contextualize the amount of energy. 1 million gallons equals 1 megawatt. So put that into your calculator.
Yeah, resource recovery, that's a great example of another resource that's in our wastewater. And I think that, one of the things is, I think going back and fixing is it's more challenging because you have to dig up, when is the next time I'm gonna dig up my sewer? But a lot of you, I think I was speaking to several of you before this talk, and you're in, urban planning, sustainability, like at the planning phase, it's so important to have these ideas discussed and at the table, because I feel like, that's when the inertia is the least, like at the planning stage. Going back and retrofitting is always gonna be a heavier lift. So these ideas and thought processes, if you're at the planning stage or at the table during planning stage to, sort of have these design concepts thought through at that time, that's where it's the best chance of getting into the facility.
It's happening on this campus. We were talking before that hundreds of millions of dollars have been funneled to the SUNY portfolio from the state, and there's the Clean Water Act. But there's a wastewater treatment plant on this campus. There's geothermal going in on this campus. New dormitories. They already have hydronic loops that they maintain, right? It's a cogen plant. There's the assets are here. This is a perfect laboratory, this campus. College campuses in general, but I'm biased because I grew up here. But this college campus is a laboratory for these types of conversations where we can use the existing wastewater treatment plant, use new data sets, right? And new ways to analyze, to see how it's going to impact the grid internally to the campus as well as externally. I still would love to know more about your digital twinning I'm sorry to take your questions from you, but as far as, because grid power management is a really, really, really scary topic for Con Edison in particular. I'm working with them right now. There's a big hotel casino going up near where the Mets play baseball, and they're talking about the amount of power that they're going to have to bring to that campus to have it operate is frightening. And I just don't know where the power is coming from. So it becomes a power generation, distribution, and power, transmission and distribution issue, and modeling all of that. So thank you for doing it. I don't know if you're talking to Con Ed, but they could use your help.
Both Aaron and Hendrik, I noticed that you both share this optimism about the potential of data centers to give back to communities. But there's the obvious issues right now. In Maine alone, last month, they almost passed a bill to ban data centers in the state. It was vetoed by the governor because she said it would bring in economic prosperity yesterday. In Virginia, what they call the data center alley, electricity bills have risen over 200% over the last 5 years. So I want you to sort of like explain where this optimism comes from, how we can actually, have communities benefit from it, and what are the actionable steps to get there?
Yeah, I think, even these bans, I think there's some temporary bans. They're going to get the industry going, or everyone else actually who has an interest in AI and making sure that the benefits of AI, which clearly also are evident that they can be harnessed. So I think, to me, that's just part of a natural process. But let me also maybe say, right, I clearly understand a community's perspective, right? If you think about the perception of AI in many communities, which is, oh, this is an ugly building, it increases my electricity cost, it uses up my water, it steals my jobs, so it's not a good story. And the trouble is that in many cases, the people who benefit from these data centers are not part of these communities. So policy has to work there, or certain things have to be implemented, right? So that local communities can actually benefit from the positive sides of AI. The other thing I would say is, and that's sort of more of a technical argument, comes back to this grid interaction. Today, of course, another good policy would be requiring data center operators to provide flexibility to the grid. Because as we all know, especially in areas where we produce where we have a lot of renewables, sometimes we're overproducing energy, sometimes energy is cheap, sometimes we don't have enough energy. And a lot of the cost, in fact, comes from the fact that we have a 99.9% target typically for most transmission grids, and distribution grids a little bit less. And so flexibility going to go a long way, not only to lower the cost, but then also to provide basically some benefits to everyone.
That's actually a really good point. He mentioned earlier, procurement. I used to be in the supply side of energy, on that side of the equation. And one of the most lucrative programs that especially large commercial and industrial clients can take advantage of is called demand response, where basically the grid operator, so NISO, New York Independent System Operator, or Con Edison, National Grid, whoever's, there are programs where they say, look, if you sign up for this program and we tell you during these high peak hours, we need you to curtail your electricity use down to this. We're going to pay you X amount of $1,000 per kWh that you curtail. It can turn into millions of dollars a year for these large users. So to your point, there's a way that flexibility can turn into a financial revenue model, not only to benefit the grid, but to benefit the end user. So you're right, it comes down to policy, it comes down to creating those interplays between the grid operators, the state administrators, and the utilities. It's a really challenging matrix. You used the word nexus before. It really is. It's like 4D chess. It can be very challenging. But once they figure it out, and and it's interesting because I'm actually using Claude vibe coding right now to develop a software platform because I want to figure that out. Because I see these large districts like fully encompass like vertical living communities where you include agriculture, you include all of the things, right? Everything from energy production all the way down to resource recapture. When you really get down to it, a properly designed system comes down to, at least from an energy standpoint, it's controls. What energy do you use? Where do you use it? And when do you use it? And if you can figure out those interplays, you can really make a very flexible, grid-friendly application. But it's a big lift. It's a really big lift. And here I am using AI technology to come up with a more efficient way to be, you know. So again, it comes back to that. It's kind of paradoxical in a way, if you will. So, but yeah, that demand response. Nothing's going to work in America if people can't make money on it. That's just the bottom line. Even today, with ESG goals in place, if it doesn't pencil, it doesn't fly. And I'm gonna be straight up right now. New York State is going through their budget reconciliation right now. I would not be surprised if you see a lot of the CLCPA climate goals backed off of, because the state's under a lot of pressure for economic development, affordable housing, grid improvement, and that all needs money. And the governor needs to be realistic. So even it comes down to a political appetite as well, in addition to policy, in addition to technology, and actually paying people to run the wires or to run the pipe in the ground. So part of my optimism, going back to your original question, is that community benefit workforce development. We have this little heat pump called Piranha, where we can use wastewater from like an apartment building or a dormitory to provide almost 100% of the hot water needed for that dorm, just from what's coming out of it. We're putting one of those piranhas in every local training center across the state to help train up that next group of people. We were talking about jobs earlier. There's going to be so many good jobs in trades, you know, where you'll be able to get a good pay, hopefully protected by a union with a pension at the end. So I think there's going to be also a shifting of the mentality from a societal standpoint to, you know, oh, you don't have a college degree. No, but I got a plumbing job and I'm making $175 an hour, you know, and life's good. So there's I keep using the word reimagining. We have to reimagine all sorts of things, everything down from, you know, policy down to interplay at the neighborhood level. So, but it all ultimately is going to come together with these software programs to help us navigate these nexus of interplaying stakeholders, you know. So, thank you. Great. It was a great question.
Nina, I wanted to go back to your international experience within SoMAS. Is there any specific policy that you've seen in countries that has really helped create a sustainable system, or on the flip side, is there any policy that's sort of, you know, withdrawn the work that you were able to do?
I think policy is definitely, it's been a driver in several situations. So I think that sometimes policy is pushing, and I'll give you some examples, and then I think sometimes it's just the economics. For example, I do projects that take agro-waste and treat it in an anaerobic environment, and it produces this gas called biogas, which is 60% methane, 40% carbon dioxide. There used to be a time that this material was, and actually often still is, just flared. It's 60% methane, it's not being used for anything, right? So that's just a waste. When I first started building these projects back in the 2010s or so, most of the projects were producing electricity in a generator with this gas and feeding it back into the electric grid. And that was driven by feed-in tariffs. So different states were giving a higher electricity rate for certain renewable types of renewable energy to promote renewable energy. So these projects started to go towards producing electricity, renewable energy. And that was driven by this feed-in tariff policy. Well, now if you look at most of the anaerobic digestion projects that are producing biogas, they're upgrading that gas to be almost 100% methane, so that it's a drop-in replacement for natural gas. And that's because there's been a shift in policy promote renewable transportation fuel. So putting it into the natural gas pipeline, you get credits from California, you get RIN credits, which are part of the national, at the federal level. So that's driven the technology path through to be more towards that. So that's an example of where policy dictated whether these projects were going to be using the biogas. They would use it if they got a benefit, and whether it be feed-in tariff or renewable natural RINs credits or carbon credits. Another example is sometimes there's just a plain out, full-blown ban on something. So I work on some projects in South Asia where there's industries that have a pretty, I'd say, produce really dirty wastewater, to be blunt. And so the government has said, well, you have to treat that wastewater to the point where you're taking it back into your industrial loop. So it's called zero liquid discharge. It's a very complex process, but they say if you don't do it, you cannot keep your industry running here. So what we're finding is that industrial parks are being created where small textile factories and many small industrial facilities are grouping together so that they can have wastewater be treated as a service for them, because this is now getting to a complex treatment process, zero liquid discharge. You have to treat every single drop of water coming out of your facility and then reuse it. It's a pretty complex treatment system. A small facility won't be able to do it on their own. But we're seeing these industrial parks form where they're grouping together this treatment system and having wastewater treatment be a service for them so they can continue to operate. Again, driven by this ban on discharging this wastewater into the local wastewater treatment systems. But on the flip side, we're also seeing that oftentimes being green, being environmentally sustainable is actually improving the bottom line. And that's also driving innovation. So if you live in an area where energy is expensive, why wouldn't you try to save 30% of your energy and make your processing of your wastewater more energy efficient? It can result in millions of dollars of savings at the facility. So I feel like that's also a driver, is just the pure cost is also aligning yourself with sustainability is actually also saving operational expenses.
I'd like to shift focus now to the job market. A lot of us are, college students, and the job market is looking fairly bleak right now. So I was wondering if you could all go over, in your own respective fields, what jobs you think will prop up in the intersection of AI, water, and energy, and specifically how sustainability students can get involved to try to make this system more circular and just. Feel free.
Okay, I will go first. That's a really good question. So if someone would have asked me that question 5 years ago, maybe I would have said, well, you want to definitely do some AI education, some computer science, etc., etc. But I think my answer is changing, and because you think about it, right? If AI continues to improve as it does, so what should we do, right? What is the most valuable job there is? And at the end, we'll all become, if AI really improves that much, right, we'll all become some type of supervisor. We're going to be some type of verifiers. So someone needs to verify whether this, right, whether this all makes sense. The code AI has just written, right? Someone needs to test it. And how can you test that? Well, you need domain knowledge, right? You need to understand what it is, right? The problem you want to solve. So, in my mind, while maybe some would have said 5 years ago, well, domain sciences, they're all on retreat, I think they actually will excel. So knowing really domain, really knowing the problem you need to solve is irreplaceable. Because even with AI, someone at the end of the day needs to verify, right, whether whatever the tools have created for you is actually working in real life. And so I think you know, you want to really focus on your understanding, on the domain, on the applications, how these things work in real life, and what are all these considerations. So you can become such a verifier if that's what's needed.
Yeah, I think that domain knowledge is very critical, like you were saying, and I think that being able to use the tools to be able to solve valid problems will come from the domain expert. So what are the valid problems, and where should AI be used in developing and designing a solution? And one of the things that's really growing across many industries, and I think in my own industry, is the use of agentic systems and orchestrating agents. I think that skill will be really valuable for engineers going into whatever domain they're going into. I think that when I was younger, and you guys, maybe even when you guys were younger, everyone stressed like coding, learn how to code. I feel like now we need to stress with the younger generation, learn how to orchestrate agents, build your orchestration system. So I think that will be really helpful, but you still need to know what problem you should solve and be able to verify, fact check, and make sure it's operating appropriately. But I also feel like certain skills, like to your point, Aaron, we're gonna have new jobs out there, and we need people who can actually build physical systems, right? The plumber. The wastewater, we need wastewater treatment operators. There's actually what we call a silver tsunami. Wastewater treatment operators are retiring by, 30% in the next 5 years. 30% have already retired in the last 10 years, and we're not getting enough replacement. And in my opinion, it's a really great, solid, secure job. You problem solve, you use AI and different tools to be a better operator, but those are the kind of jobs that I think we should be, maybe it's a mental shift, mindset shift, because maybe that wasn't something that you not necessarily went to college for in the past, but with AI and different tools, I don't know what the approach or, funnel to those jobs should be going forward, but those are jobs that are still gonna be needed. You're still gonna have pumps that break down. You still need to know how to fix them. So, yeah.
That's brilliant. I've never heard silver tsunami. I was just at SUNY Cobleskill a couple months ago. The Danish consulate invited me up to go speak at a thermal energy network symposium. And it was basically all the facilities, well, not all of them, because I don't think Stony was represented, but a lot of the upstate facilities directors, Binghamton, Oneonta, Oswego, just name it, they're all there. To a person, they were saying in the next 5 to 7 years, they're going to be losing, at each campus, 250 years of combined experience as these older engineers retire, and there isn't a wave of young people coming in who want to learn how to, maintain a natural gas condensing boiler and, all these systems. But there are a ton of those jobs that are going to be kind of like 1 foot in current where we are now and 1 foot in that space you were describing, where you're maintaining those same systems or augmented or newer versions of said systems, but using AI, using new tools to do it more efficiently. So there is a ton of those types of operational jobs. Again, trades, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, people who work civil engineers. My job requires people to tap into city sewers, right? And then, so I've got one set of laborers that are laying pipe in the street, then it hits the building envelope, and I've got pipe fitters and steam fitters that take it to the piece of equipment, and then it's plumbers. And I've got electricians and carpenters and structural engineers. It's a melange of skilled trades. And you're right, there are a lot of those jobs are cycling over. And I'd mentioned this earlier. WSP, one of the world's largest engineering firms, in their annual report this past year, used a phrase I'd never heard before: machine in the middle. Meaning they're going to use AI to do all of the heavy lifting, all the grunt work, but there will be a person who's interfacing with the end user, the architect, the developer, whomever it is, to take the inputs, feed it into, and to manage those agents. And then once it spits out whatever the information is, there's going to be a human, whether it's the same one or a different human, that's going to verify that data and then hand that back to the human end user at this end. And until we have, I guess, AI operated buildings where there's no humans whatsoever, there's always going to be that human relationship. And my job is all about human-to-human contact. Ultimately, yeah, I'm delivering, schematics and drawings and estimates, but it's all about that relationship. So I would say don't lose that either. But there's a ton of really cool spaces where you're going to be able to carve out your own niche, and that's going to be the people who really succeed in this next phase, I think, are the ones who are going to be able to, create their own space, whether it's you're making your own app, right? Or you don't have to become a developer necessarily, but you learn how to control agents that will do the work for you. So be creative, don't be scared, send me your CV. I meet a lot of people, there's a lot of work out there. You just have to be willing to do it. I just ran into an architect friend of mine who basically he's having a hard time hiring people, because he's got people graduating architecture school who just don't want to put in the work. So I'll tell you this, if you're willing to put in the hours, you will find work, I promise you. I'm gonna need to hire some people soon. Not yet, but soon. So, if you like wastewater.
Thank you for your answers. We're going to switch to an open floor Q&A right now. So before you ask your question, please state your name, your major if you're a student, who you're addressing your question to, and then your question.
By the way, I want to thank the class for putting this panel together. This was great. Super excited to be here. I know my fellow panelists feel the same way. I'm sorry for speaking for you, but thank you. And kudos. This was a super professional gig, and arguably some of the best panel food I've had, so.
My name is Derek Vargas. I don't go to school here, but I'm a union plumber, and I have a brother who's a programmer for at least 17 years, and he recently has been out of work because of AI. So I just want to know about the sustainability of it, because I think private equity is behind this, all the investments of it and everything. Ultimately, I was just a little nervous. First time speaking in front of a crowd. Yeah, just the sustainability of it. Is like, what can we see in the future with it, with private equity going on, money flowing into it? What's the benefit for working class people? Thank you. Anyone who wants to answer? Yeah.
It's a great question, and you did a good job for your first time speaking in front of a crowd. You got this.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's going to be some pain in the short term. Again, kind of going back to you mentioned, we're in that interesting kind of like cavitational period where where the propeller is going the other direction all of a sudden. We're not really moving forward, we're not going back, we're just kind of sitting still, but some people are out of work. Job retraining, career retraining is I know it's a big push for the WDI, Workforce Development Institute. I would recommend your brother get in touch with the state. There's a whole bunch of programs. What's kind of stinks about it is it's actually almost a full-time job right now, trying to figure out where those pathways are. But does he need an apprentice? Do you need an apprentice? Maybe.
I am an apprentice.
I was going to say, would your brother become a plumber, or would he ever?
Oh yeah, he's thinking into it. The trades are, Sam Altman has said trades are going to be millionaires of the future.
It's where it's at, man. Listen, I went to high school with some kids who became garbage men right out of graduation. They're retired right now.
Yeah, it's great.
Civil work is good.
Yeah. we're on the cusp of a big boom in trade work, actually. Thank you for answering my question.
Are there any other questions?
My name is Derek Lucido. I'm a junior and my major is engineering science and I have a minor in sustainability studies. So my question is for any of you, but like, do you guys really, like, cause you talked about a bunch of projects that are going on in like new technology. Like, do you really think that that's gonna be implemented, I would say like in good time? Cause I feel like a lot of innovation can sometimes be very slow, like especially that renewable energy is cheaper than gas, but it's still like they don't want to replace it yet because it's like, you know, more to replace it, even though it's cheaper. So like, that's my question. Like, do you really think it's gonna happen in a good time? Or do you think it's gonna take like a longer time to implement these solutions?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think if there is, you know, the truth is, if there is a clear economic incentive, these new technologies will be implemented very, very, very fast, right? I think that is really where potentially also policy could come in, but what is the business model, right? The reason why renewables aren't coming, or haven't come that much as some people maybe imagined at some point, has a lot to do that, of course, the business model is not well defined, right? Or some people would argue that fossil fuels are heavily supported by other investments and they don't have to clean up, etc., etc. So what I'm trying to say is, to me, when I've seen things moving very, very fast, that is when we had a viable business model. And the reason why we have this whole AI discussion is also because, for better or worse, probably for worse, for many reasons, is because industry has figured out a business model and they're running with it. And anyway, that's where policy has to come in play. So some regulations, etc. But I think, and we had this at the lunch table too, you know, you want to think about the economics of all these things, right? Because that's unfortunately what moves the real things. And if you have a clear economic reason, new technologies will be implemented in no time.
I also wanted to just share, you know, sometimes it's pure economic, sometimes it's a world event that kind of causes a seismic shift. And what we're seeing with the Iran war and the price of gas and how, you know, vulnerable we are is driving people who, you know, countries to be like, okay, I want more domestic energy production, even if it means it's more costly because it makes me more secure. And you know, we're seeing that with, for example, the project I was mentioning, renewable. I'm working on a large renewable natural gas project in India. They don't have much domestic natural gas. I mean, domestic non-renewable natural gas. So they are trying to incentivize plants to produce renewable natural gas. And I think the crisis that we're seeing right now has only strengthened the government's argument. And it wasn't just oil, it was also fertilizer. A lot of fertilizer goes to the Strait of Hormuz. If you treat agro waste to produce renewable natural gas, you also have organic fertilizer at the tail end, domestic organic fertilizer. So I think that sometimes world events also cause seismic, you know, shifts in technology. I think the technology is there, it's ready to go. The thing is, can it be put on the table at the planning stage? Can it be envisioned when you envision an engineering system to bring in these sustainability pieces? I think that's important, and sometimes it's purely economic. Sometimes there are other drivers, like being, you know, self-sufficient maybe is something that people will be more interested in now.
Yeah, I would, and again, I mentioned it earlier about just if it doesn't pencil, it won't fly. My little stump here. Education, healthcare, and climate change are three things that the profit motive just doesn't work for. The problem is we're in America, so it has to be financially solvent in order for it to move forward. So don't despair. We just need to, again, it comes down to policy, it comes down to voting, it comes down to community organization. This really needs to be a grassroots up in order to affect change at the top, to start having things come down, and framing conversations in a way that actually sell projects. Because quite frankly, again, unless you find the right client, ESG, climate change, carbon, that doesn't really move the needle, unless of course you're in New York City and local law 97 is gonna put you into a multi-million-dollar carbon tax next year, right? So it all comes down to money again. So if you can reframe these conversations on like, this is a way that we can deploy technology to make you more efficient, more profitable, have you be able to hire more people, good people that are going to stick around and you can treat well. Like it's all of that. And I know that sounds a little, utopian, but there's a great book that I've shared with pretty much anybody to listen, Abundance. It's very simplistic, but I think you get through the first 50 pages, you have this whole thesis. Ezra Klein, they're basically saying we need to start thinking about the world from a place of abundance. Stop looking at it from a place of scarcity. We have what we need. It's just a matter of allocating it right. And it comes down to better tax policy, better energy policy, better workforce development policy. And again, if we start looking at you mentioned Iran, something I didn't even think of, the professor mentioned earlier that in order to cool these quantum computers, the liquid helium is really necessary. Well, guess where a lot of that comes from? From that area of the world. So national security, and energy independence. These are all key things. One of the reasons why China's eating our lunch right now is because they've just been deploying solar and wind at scale. So now they're less dependent upon foreign oil. And if we had stuck with Janine Carter's policies from the '79 budget and we stuck with wind and solar subsidies, we'd be in a much better position, but we're not. So I'm sorry, it's a very complex answer. I'm sorry, but don't despair, even though I've been a bit of a Debbie Downer here today. There's still a lot of really good things going on, and there's going to be tons of work for you. You just have to be flexible. Like the professor said, your brother was probably one of those guys who was told, hey, 10 years ago, code, and now it's just like, you're basically replaceable, right? So it's a challenging time. I don't envy any of you, but I'm also extremely jealous of all of you at the same time. It's a tough spot, but it's a great spot. So, and again, get me your CV, share it with us, because I just said it before, it's about people connecting with people. So I would love to help you guys connect with some folks and get some work. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for answering my question. You got to add everybody here on LinkedIn, bro. Yeah, I'm hoping that AI will help increase the use case, for sustainable initiatives, and hopefully get people to be convinced. So thank you.
Yeah, I definitely would say be positive. I hope you leave this session being positive, because the thing is, you're gonna, with the tools you have, just try to see what you can do to do good, right? And I think that you're gonna have I was just there was an AI symposium last week here on campus, and I went to the industrial symposium, and someone from SUNY upstate was speaking, and she said that in 5 years we will have a cure for cancer. She had no doubt in her mind. She's a medical professional. I was hopeful to hear that. But the thing is, think about the impact you can make in the domain you're learning about right now with the tools you have. And you'll be able to do that much more efficiently than I can, because you are growing up with it, right? So I think that there is a lot to be hopeful for going forward with with the tools you have now.
Hello, my name is Sophia. Thank you so much for joining us today. All of you have jobs in the wastewater sector or related to that, or not you, Professor, but I was wondering, with all these innovations that are happening, Do you believe that the public or private sector has more promise for making these innovations? And which would you recommend us students get involved in?
That's a great question. And what I would say is that what's wild about our technology is that we're very Canadian, very flexible in how we are deployed mechanically, but we are deployed in private ownership. We've got your utilities are operating us, but the ones that are, and ESCOs, energy as a service, where there's a third-party financier. I like those projects because the financier usually has a performance guarantee at the other end. So they have a vested interest in making sure the system is designed properly and operated well so they can actually deliver what they want. But you'll hear of PPPs, public-private partnerships. Those, I think, are going to unlock the market, because it's an intersection between, again, we're kind of repeating ourselves, but like literally policy and then like municipal level and then, so federal, state, town, community. So somewhere in there, there's a blend between the private sector and the public sector. The real trick is what's the most financially viable, what's going to make economic sense. So I wish it was the public sector. I wish we were taxing more of the people who have, so we could actually afford things, because there's enough money in this country to pay for all of this. That being said, because that's just a pipe dream and will never happen, the public-private partnership, that PPP intersection for me, I think long-term is going to be what's going to provide like scale over not only scale from a breadth of what we're covering, but scale on time as well. Because you can lock in, when you partner up with a utility like Con Edison, they can amateurize a project over 80 years and break that cost over, so it becomes almost negligible to them. So having them, even though they're slow and hard to move, having that anchor provides that financial stability. Markets love stability, predictability, and utilities are very predictable. So having that public entity as part of it's great, but it's the private money, the guys and gals who are going to make the cash. They're the ones who are going to drive the innovation and make the utilities kind of be their horses as they ride them into the sunset, to end on a weird analogy or metaphor.
Okay.
I got another question. So, because private equity is behind this, and you can say that they're also behind the energy demands that need to be met in order to sustain this AI boom, what about the promises of nuclear energy instead of wind or solar? Whoever, anyone.
Sorry, could you repeat your question?
What about the promises of nuclear energy instead of wind or solar?
We need it all.
Nuclear is being looked at again, right? After sort of these experiences we had in Japan, etc. But I give you a very technical answer, right? I think it's a really good question to ask whether the negative impacts of, for example, right, of nuclear energy, which we've seen in Fukushima and so on and so forth, how do they compare to coal burning and other things, right? Where there's also clearly a lot of negative effects, etc. So anyway, I think it's a good discussion to have, right? To see whether nuclear is actually a viable technology. There's a lot of focus now on very small modular reactors, because the feeling is they can be brought online much faster. So there's a bunch of research going on, a bunch of startups. In fact, we had this job discussion, so if you're interested in a future industry, that might be one, right, for sure. But it's definitely an area which where there's now a lot of investment again, right? And the reason is because people are really going back and saying, okay, we had some negative experiences with nuclear. Of course, we have a waste issue that needs to be taken care of, but maybe that is something we can much better handle than rising CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, I would echo that. Small SMR, small modular reactors are really cool. And yes, it all comes down to risk mitigation. And I don't know, listen, Fukushima and Chernobyl were terrible, but so was, deep well rising, whatever, the BP leak in the Gulf. So all energy sectors have their risk. It comes down to, we need the power. It needs to be a blended approach. It needs to be a nexus. There's no one silver bullet. It takes a village, literally. So every single bit of energy that we can grab is going to be key. And hopefully, we're, cold fission, some cold fusion, just like some kind of, the next technology will provide us, hopefully, knock wood, the energy we need in a form that is not going to be completely detrimental to us and to our environment. So, thank you. You're welcome.
No. One more question, sorry. It's a good topic. So, there's a lot of bias, like the people who control AI, like OpenAI, Anthropic. There's been reported some biases in what they say based on what you ask. Like, with that being said, would we even see any of the actual benefit on a community level because of those certain biases? And like authoritative control behind it?
No, I think that that's something we have to be well aware of. There's biases, there's racial biases, there's gender biases. So, depending on what you're using it for, one needs to be aware. That's where you don't just blindly deploy AI to every solution. There's an issue of, transparency, trust, biases. Is it reliable enough to be making a decision on this minority group that it's not been trained on, or this, on females, or whatever, right? I think that those are very important discussions that have to be brought to the table when you're designing an AI system, without which there could be, very catastrophic consequences. So just in wastewater, this is a kind of a simple example, but I worked on a project for the US Army where we trained data to be able to classify whether that data was safe to discharge or safe to reuse. But because the data of, there's certain events that are very rare, so they weren't very represented in the training data. So when the machine learning model was operating in that space where it did not have training data, we switched to making more conventional decisions. That's just an example of what we did in wastewater, but this is a very serious consideration when you're making an AI system.
Yeah, and real quick, actually, the biases, which is going to be really scary, is the biases against humanity, against the controller. Because, like, look at Mythos, that banking software that they refused to release because it basically found flaws in like 91% of the banking systems in the world. It would literally like consume the banking system. There was a story recently where they trained the AI. They got into they were training the AI to do something, and then they basically fed it the information that they were going to cancel the program. And so the AI actually searched the emails of one of the engineers and found out that he was having an affair and blackmailed him and threatened to basically expose him if he canceled the program. So there's like really creepy, like, Terminator type biases. So it comes down to policy. Again, look what happened. We let Facebook and all these guys like get away with murder, and now like they're getting away with murder. So if we can get ahead, goes back to mechanical, proper design early on, making smart, pragmatic, sensible decisions early on, and getting a handle on it now, because it's an arms race, because there's so much money. So it's great questions, and I'm telling you, man, you should become an organizer. Get out there. You got some good ideas. I'm kind of being light, but I'm being serious. It's gonna take us to really vote in the right people and make sure that good decisions are being made so that we can let these innovations work for the betterment of mankind, humankind, as opposed to, self-consuming, which we're seem to be really good at as a species.
But has that worked? Has like voting
Regulation, sure. I mean, look at seatbelts, right? You know, there are. It's a very simplistic example, but there are practical examples of where you can take something that was just otherwise, you know, smoking in public, right? It's like enough public outcry comes, and we got this. So, and I think that anti-smoking like methodology, or like that, the way they went about it, is a perfect way to look at this as well. Oh, looks like you're about to say something.
If I could just a tiny comment there. I think you're completely right. The fact that a lot of people, of course, always say, oh yeah, AI is biased, it hallucinates. And I know what I'm going to say now doesn't make it better, but a lot of people hallucinate too, right? A lot of people are biased too. So no matter what, there has to be some type of verification, right? And that never goes away, right? Whether AI makes a decision, or whether even other people are making the decision, or whether we have a discussion, a discourse. So this always stays. So I don't think it's unique to AI.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your questions. Unfortunately, we have gone over time right now, so I'm going to have to wrap things up. I just want to say thank you to our professor, Dr. Ryder, who's been such an amazing professor for our capstone class. Also to C4E for making this event even possible in the first place, and of course to our panelists, thank you for coming.